And then, is it possible to enter into Vrindavan and be part of Krishna's entourage, his eternal associates, to become one of his devotees eternally in the spiritual realm of Vaikuntha and Vraja? So that was our topic. And we discussed several things. One of the things we discussed was the quality of humility that accompanies such a person. One of those such a persons is Sanatana Goswami. We spent some time discussing about Sanatana Goswami and his qualities. There were three that Lord Chaitanya mentioned to Ramananda Roy when introducing him, because Ramananda Roy was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri and Sanatana Goswami was visiting. And when he was visiting, Lord Chaitanya introduced him to Ramananda Roy. And he introduced him by saying that this devotee, has renounced his material connections like you. Because both of them, Ramananda Roy was the governor of, the language used in Chaitanya Charitamrita was governor of Madras, which meant more than just the city of Madras. It was a whole geographic area. He was the governor and he left it. And Sanatana Goswami was the prime minister of a very large state in North India, and he left it. So renounce, here's material connections, you're like one another. And then he listed his qualities along with renunciation. He is highly learned, and he's also very humble, like you. And then he went on to say that both he and Rupa Goswami, I invested potency in both of them to understand thoroughly all my teachings and to go to Vrindavan and write books on the teachings that I've given them. So we focused a little bit on, of those three qualities he identified, the one of humility. And the reason that we also spoke about Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami's humility, and how humility is a prerequisite. We touched on the topic. And how we did was by going to a text written by another one of the six Goswamis, named, the text is Mana Shiksha. Mana means mind. Shiksha means instructions. So Raghunatha Dasa is giving instructions to his mind and similarly giving instructions to our minds how to enter Vrindavan. And there were two outstanding traits in the Sanskrit of the first verse. One was sada dambam hitva, or giving up, completely giving up, abandoning pride. There's different words for pride, but this is, even it sounds like bad, dumb, bum. That's pride, a bad kind of pride. So one should give it up. So an antidote to, we spent some time following that. What's the antidote to pride is humility. And we discussed a little bit about humility. So this evening is a continuation of that topic. There were additional points. How to come to that. The other quality was excessive attachment, extreme and excessive attachment to certain items of transcendence. And one of them was great personalities like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and Swarup Damodar. So how to become like them is in part to hear about them and to learn more about, although there's the intellectual part, It takes an idea to have intelligence to understand a thing, so you can guide the mind. When things are in proper order, the intelligence gives direction to the mind. And then the mind gives direction to the senses, and off you go, in whatever the direction is. That's the hierarchy described in Bhagavad Gita. There's a verse where Krishna says like that. Higher than the senses, Indriyani Paranyahur, Indriyebhya Param Manaha. The senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is superior to the senses. The intelligence is superior to the mind. And the soul is above all. So for the soul to make its way in the course of our lives, whatever the background of past activities of our lives may have been, we're now on a journey of going to Krishna. And Krishna, ideally, at least according to Raghunatha Das Goswami, if at all you wish to be engaged in the eternal loving service of Radha Krishna in Vrindavan, eternal means you're not pleading for another, release from, not pleading for moksha, but eternal service, which is higher than moksha, is beyond moksha. Eternal service. Moksha is a subset of eternal. Eternal service. And so the next 3 evenings, the plan is to spend some time on what is this humility that was being spoken of, or abandonment of pride is humility, or humility is the antidote for pride. So what is it? So that's the topic. True humility precedes true bhakti. Here's a nice verse from the 29th chapter of Canto 3. And the 29th chapter of Canto 3 is a discussion between Kapila Deva and his mother Devahuti. And in the course of this discussion, he is amplifying a certain subject matter that was discussed between the 2 persons on the left, seated inside that little cave there in the Himalayas. That's Maitreya Muni. And the person with the white dhoti, who's that person? Who knows? Uddhava. No. Who is it? Huh? Vidura. So Vidura, there's a long story without the nice story. It's a very nice story. But Vidura had the opportunity to meet Uddhava, who then, he asked many questions of Uddhava, and Uddhava said, I'm not so qualified, but up a little bit further north in the Himalayas, there's Maitreya. You find him and you ask those questions of him. And so on the right is Lord Kapila Dev speaking to Devahuti, and he is discussing this particular point. And along with this particular point, there's this, again, same mention of humility, as Krishna says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Some of you like Bhagavad Gita. Most of us like Bhagavad Gita. In the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there's a discussion between one of Arjuna's questions is he wants to know the difference between matter and spirit. Now, what was discussed earlier in Bhagavad Gita, but it's further elaboration on the matter and spirit topic. And he asks that matter and spirit question in 3 pairs of 2. So 3 pairs of 2 make 6. So there's 6 questions. And one of those pairs is, What's knowledge and the object of knowledge? What's prakriti? What's purusha? What's field of activity and the knower field of activity? That's the three pairs. So in discussing what's knowledge, the first two items of knowledge that Krishna identifies is these. Amanitvam adambitvam, humility and pridelessness. Amanitvam adambitvam, humility and pridelessness. Note that this is what item, a preliminary item that Raghunath Das Goswami mentions in Manashiksha is if you at all want eternal residence in Vrindavan, in the loving service of Radha and Krishna, by all means, like a preliminary, Adam, it's sada, dambam, hitva, give up pride. Because it's a nemesis, it blocks bhakti. And humility invites bhakti, or humility is a foundational, essential freedom from pride. Similarly, just there's so many evidences. The one that was mentioned before, spoken by this chapter 29 is in the series of Lord Kapila Dev's teaching Sankhya philosophy. But the conclusion of Sankhya, where's the Sankhya going? What's the purpose of Sankhya? What's the purpose of the Vedas? Because Sankhya is part of the Vedas. Sankhya, again, it's at analysis of matter and spirit, categories of matter, categories of spirit. We belong to the category of spirit. And then there's degrees of that understanding. But the understanding is meant to be applied. And when it's applied, it's bhakti. So this chapter 29 is pure devotional service. And he's discussing this necessity of becoming free from pride. Same in Bhagavad Gita, same in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching, Shikshastika, verse number 3, Trinadapi Sunichena, Toror Api Sahishnuna Amanina Madadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Trin means straw. So, or a blade of grass. When it dries, it becomes straw. So, more humble, sunichena, more humble than a blade of grass or a piece of straw. You know, it's insignificant. It's something, but quite insignificant. Supposing, you walk out the front door and you see on the sidewalk a blade of grass or a piece of straw. You don't pay much attention to it because it's insignificant. There's so many blades of grass and so many pieces of straw. So thinking of oneself quite insignificant in relation to the significant. That's important. Insignificant doesn't mean low self-esteem or depression or feeling bad about oneself or not being enthusiastic because you're no good or something like that. That negative emotion thing is not what humility is. Humility is, we're part and parcel of the Supreme, so we're certainly significant because we're part and parcel of the Supreme. But in relation to the Supreme, we're very tiny. So that our tininess, reality in tininess, that's humility. But that's nice. Being tiny is nice in relation to the Supreme, the source of everything. And then it becomes another understanding. What's that other understanding? That the part is meant to serve the whole. Like the hand is meant to serve the body, supposing instead of a straw, you find a little, a nut and bolt lying on the sidewalk. It's disconnected from the machine that it's part of. It's worthless. It's meaningless. But if you have a machine that needs a certain nut or a certain bolt, you might take good care of, expend some funds to get this little part because it's needed to make the machine work, etc. Many, many nice examples that can be given. Prabhupada gives this really gruesome example. Supposing your hand is cut off from the rest of your body, or supposing a finger is in pain, or it's dislocated, or something like that. It's painful, and you'll spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy and effort to make it properly functioning again. Healing some wound may take some time, but you invest some time because it's important, because it's part of the body, an important part of the body. So there's this Trinadapi Suniche Na, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he's reciting this verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, raising my hands, I declare, everyone please hear me, string this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it on your neck for continuous remembrance. So it's a fundamental and an important teaching, humility. All of this is just scriptural evidence to support it's true. Humility is very important. I've been contemplating it for different reasons. One is it's good to plan things ahead of time. Are there any devotees here that are coming to Sri Lanka? One. You're raising your hand. Maybe. Well, those that you aren't coming will miss you, but for those of you that are in school, you won't be able to come because it's during school. But all the arrangements have been made, and it's going to be a fantastic experience, and it's going to be recorded, so you'll get to see. And then next year, we went to Sri Lanka. This is a little deviation from the main topic, but we went to Sri Lanka. The plan was made to go to Sri Lanka because the devotees in China can't get a visa to go to India. And vice versa. People in India can't get a visa to go to China. China won't issue visas to Indians. They were like, having a problem with each other over uninhabitable tracts of land, in Prabhupada's language. But now they have another purpose. At least China has another purpose. Align the East against the West is politics. And so we'll give you visas, you give us visas, and we'll be happy again. So I just checked today, and it hasn't come through yet, although they've had their second round of talks, and it's going to happen probably this year. Let's see. And if it does happen this year, then the next year we'll be having a yatra to Vrindavan. Yay. It's been a while. And this is a scene that we'll see when we go to Vrindavan. You see this as Krishna Balaram. And where the deity is in a secluded place. The place is called Ter Kadamba. Ter in the local language means call, and Kadamba is a certain kind of tree. Kadamba tree has little Kadamba flowers that are round like a ball. And the cowherd boys would play ball with the Kadamba flowers, and they would do different things. So this place, Ter Kadamba, is on the Prikrama path heading towards Nandagram. So in the morning, Krishna would go out and evening Krishna would come back. And during the day, he's with the cowherd boys and the cows. So when it came time to come back, Krishna would climb up a kadamba tree, and using his flute, his magical flute, he would call the names of the groups of cows. And the cows would kind of like hang out and wait for their name to be called. And when Krishna would call it, because his flute cannot just make musical notes, it can call names. So he would call the names of the groups. And when they heard their name called, moo, and they came running. And they would hang out waiting till Krishna called them, the next group, next group. And he did this at the top of a tree, of the top of a kadamba tree. And that's how it got its name, Ter Kadamba. He would call the cows on the top of it, from the top of a tree. So there's a place in Vrindavan that's very near the base of Krishna's, his father's residence. It's up on a hill, and a nice palace, and there's a nice temple up there on top of the hill. So before Krishna reached his home, he'd go to this place. So near that place, there's still a grove of trees, like a little forested area. And inside the forested area is where these deities are, Krishna Balaram, commemorating the pastimes of Krishna and Balaram from the time when Krishna was present. And above the altar, when you go, you take a look, just above the altar, it's not like a neon sign or something, it's a small little placard. And it's in Hindi as well, it's in English. And this sign reads, this is a very nice prayer written by Raghunatha Das Goswami. And notice the word Trind is in the phrase, the prayers. Adadanas Tranandantayar, Idam Yache Puna Puna, again and again. Srimad Rupa Padam Bhojo. Rajoham Syam Bhave Bhave. Taking a blade of grass between my teeth, I repeatedly beg that birth after birth I may obtain the dust from Srila Rupa Goswami's lotus feet. The author is Raghunatha Das Goswami, but it's a certain kind of humility that he had, not just in relation to the Supreme, but he looked up to Rupa Goswami, not just by his age, but his stature. And he was such an important person for all the residents of Vrindavan, and in particular here, Raghunatha Das Goswami. So much so that he's not asking for liberation, he's asking for dust. Birth after birth. And in Srila Prabhupada's explanation of the Shikshastika verse, where Trind is also mentioned, he makes reference to this pastime where you see this lady in Jagannath Puri, and a very elderly lady, was so enthusiastic to see Lord Jagannath, and she was small. And the crowd in front of the deity was so big. And she wanted to see the deity so badly. With her enthusiasm, she didn't even know what she was doing. She climbed up on the shoulders of a sannyasi, in holding on to the Gruda Stamba so she could see the deity. Because we know that the Gruda Stamba is towards the back. So it's Garuda up on a tall stamba or a pillar, column, and he's viewing the deity. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would stand behind the Garuda Stamba, viewing the deity in his humility. So Govinda, his servant, is telling the lady, "Get down, what are you doing? You're standing on Mahaprabhu's shoulders." And Mahaprabhu said to Govinda, No, 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 no. Leave her alone. If I only had such enthusiasm to have darshan of Lord Jagannath, my life would be perfect. And after some time, she realized what she had done. She looked around and saw she was standing on Lord Chaitanya's shoulders, and she got down and paid her obeisances and profusely apologized. And no need to apologize when you're in that kind of enthusiasm. So, but with humility, or another nice example is lower than a downtrodden blade of grass. As you see on the right side, that's Sanatan Goswami with a blade of grass in his teeth, which was, at that time, it was a cultural way of expression of humility. The blade of grass that's just discarded on the street, I put in my teeth and place it in my teeth. I grasp your lotus feet, and it's just an expression of humility. Lower than that. Or another example is what you see in the screen here. In Vrindavan, I hope some of you will get to go to Vrindavan with us. In Vrindavan, it's not uncommon to see a scene that you see here. Sometimes you'll see devotees going around Radhakund doing Dandabats Parikrama, or sometimes devotees will go around the whole of Govardhan Hill. And the system is, there's different systems. One of them is just take one stone, and another system is take 108 stones and pay obeisances and extend at full arm's length, holding a stone and placing the stone and offering prayers, pranams to the hill and to the guru, etc. And then you see they have a little straw mat, then get back up again, take another stone that's by their feet, and then full dandabats once again, and full dandabats once again, and full dandabats, and do 108 of those, and you get up to where the stones are piled, and then they move their straw mat, and they do another 108 times. It's like you may have sore knees by the time you're done, but you certainly have humility. And it's an exercise of striving for humility. So when one has that kind of humility, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shikshastaka, in that state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So we find in Vrindavan that there are persons in different orders of life. This is a widow. I'm looking over there at Amara, who's taking careful notes. But in this book that I asked you to take a look at, 5 years, 7 months, 5 years, 11 months, Vishaka, who wasn't initiated at the time, she was just a photojournalist who had gone to Vrindavan to take photographs of Vrindavan. She got an assignment from a publisher as a photojournalist to take photos of the people in Vrindavan. And she stayed in Vrindavan before she knew much about Krishna Bhakti or anything, and just was fascinated by how the Vrijbasi ladies, the widows, who had migrated there because there was no one to protect them, so they came to Vrindavan and stayed in Vrindavan in very meager means, but she describes in details how they lived their lives, and not just chanting, but in little simple services, but their hearts were very happy. Now, she didn't speak the local language. Vishaka didn't speak the local language, and they didn't speak English, but their happiness and their kind of activities moved her heart, because she had come from the West, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And their simplicity and purity and humility and devotion moved her. She found in their lives not affluence, which is what she had come from, but happiness, which she didn't find where she was before. A contentment of heart with very simple living. So, and chanting the holy name constantly in that humble state of mind. So we all have experience of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and one of the things to help us chant the Hare Krishna mantra is this humility. In many cases, like when we offer our pranam mantras, just like the pranam mantra to Srila Prabhupada, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale. Many mantras start with this Namaha. And Namaha, like Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, it's an expression of humility. Here's the etymology of how it works. Ma represents ahankara. This is from Padma Purana. Ma represents ahankara, and na represents negation of ahankara. Na, maha. Thus, by uttering namaha, one negates, this is a translation of a verse from Padma Purana. Namaha negates one's independent attitude. The jiva is dependent on the Lord. He lives with dependence. Therefore, one should completely reject the idea of accomplishing by one's own capacity. Nothing is left to be accomplished by the ability of the Lord. Consigning one's body to the Lord, one should serve him. Namaha. There's the particular reference of the verses if you want to look it up later. So, what we heard a little bit yesterday is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's term, dainya. Dainya is another word, Sanskrit word. And in the writings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he takes a teaching that's found in the Vedas about surrender. And the teaching in the Vedas, again, it's Padma Purana. It says there are 6 angas or limbs of surrender. And it has a certain, the sequence in the Padma Purana is accept things favorable for bhakti, reject things unfavorable for bhakti. And then there's the other 4. Bhaktivinoda Thakur takes the sequence and turns it in a different direction. He starts with dainya. That's the first. It's an appeal. It's an appeal of humility and wishing to take shelter. And with that appeal, this is from one of his songs, were you to judge me now, you would find no good qualities. Guna nahi paibo. Paibo, paibi. Have mercy and judge me not. And then the rest of the verse. Cause me to drink the honey of your lotus feet and thereby deliver this bhakti vinod. So he's submitting in humility his disqualification. Nonetheless, although not qualified, he wants mercy. And he wants mercy from one who is merciful, that even someone's not qualified, if they're eager to receive mercy, although not qualified, they're ready to give it. And not only ready to give it, but he's asking, please make me drink this, the honey of your lotus feet. So this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's poetry, but it's a principle that, back to the initial theme of this presentation, true humility precedes true bhakti. And then the more complete is one's humility, the more complete is one's bhakti. Very nice examples. In the background, this is the Madan Mohan temple, the spire of the temple, and Rupa and Sanatan. And they lived their lives in Vrindavan, although previously they had vast wealth. That vast wealth was of no importance to them. They left it. Chaktva Tornamashesha Mandalapati Shanim Sada Tuchavat. We read that this is one of the verses of Srinivasacharya, who was a disciple of Gopal Bhatta. And all of the six Goswamis, same. They were from aristocratic backgrounds, and they left Tuchavat. They left it aside, left it behind, and it took up the life of a mendicant. Why? Many people want just the opposite, from impoverishment to riches. And they had riches, and they just walked and distributed it. They took their wealth and used it in Krishna's service, etc., etc. There's a certain procedure that's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, what they did with that wealth. But they weren't attached to it. And they lived with it in a very humble, simple way, with no needs and no wants. And in contrast, but also in similarity, there's Haridas Thakur. Now, Haridas Thakur wasn't born in an aristocratic family. Haridas Thakur, this is a Murti. If you happen to visit Jagannath Puri, you'll most likely visit the Samadhi and the Bhajan Kutir of Haridas Thakur. So there he is, his Murti form, in front of his little Bhajan Kutir, and the temple in Puri in the background, in the painting, backdrop. So he constantly engaged in chanting of the holy name, despite difficulties, despite opposition, fixed in his determination. Fixed in his determination. The determination of, I want to be eternally engaged in Krishna's service. So this was Raghunath Das Goswami's teaching in Manashiksha. If you at all want to be eternally situated with Krishna in Vrindavan, in the service of Radha and Krishna, then this pride tendency is to be given up, and in its place, the true kind of humility. And in that true kind of humility, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. I'm going to narrate, there's a Mahabharata story that many of you know, but we'll narrate it, even you know it. There is a story in Mahabharata of a Nishada prince. Nishada means a tribal person. And he, as it was a prince, because his father was a king, King Hiranyadanu. And he name was Ekalavya, and Ekalavya wanted to become a student of Drona. You know the story. Many of you know the story. It's nice to hear stories. They're nice stories. So he, Ekalavya, went to Dronacharya and said, you're teaching the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Can I become your student also? And he said no. And it wasn't because of his birth, it was because of his quality. Say it again. It wasn't because of his birth, it was because of his quality. But Drona could understand his quality, so he said no. So what did Ekalavya do? It's in the painting. Ekalavya decided, well, I'm going to learn Dhanurveda from Drona a different way. Rather than sitting in a classroom and learning the way that he's teaching the others, he made a murti. Because he was a tribal person, the murti was just clay or mud, which means earth and water makes mud, and clay, some deity, and he made a little altar of that little deity, and then he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced archery. And one fine day, the Pandava brothers and Arjuna were off in the forest hunting, as Kshatriyas are supposed to do from time to time. And he saw something very remarkable. There was a dog that had all these arrows in his mouth, because there was a dog that was barking and barking and barking and barking and barking, and sometimes dogs just, for whatever the reason, just keep barking. So Ekalavya, at the same time, fired many arrows right in the open mouth of the dog, so the dog couldn't bark anymore. And when Arjuna saw this, he was astonished, because Drona had told him, "You're my best student, and there's nothing that I have that you will not have. You'll have everything." So when Arjuna saw this dog with arrows in his mouth, he went back to Drona and said, "This is one you didn't teach me, so how come? You said it would be undefeatable, and I would know everything that you know. But I didn't learn this one." So Drona said, "Take me to that place where you found this dog." So they went to the place, and there's Ekalavya, and there's, you see the murti of Dronacharya in the background. And so there's Dronacharya with Arjuna, and Dronacharya asked Ekalavya, "Where did you learn this skill of firing 5 arrows into the mouth of a?" He said, "I learned it from you." I said, "Really?" He didn't say anything other than, "So you're my student, yes? You learned this skill from me, yes?" "Yes." Gestured to the murti. That's how he learned. So there's one lesson. There's power in deity worship. Power in deity worship is, with faith, you worship a deity, and power can come through the deity to you. Not just archery, but anything. Whatever it is that one is focused on can come through the deity form. So he said, "Very well, you're my disciple, and you've learned this military skill from me, so I have the right to ask for dakshin, right?" "Yes." "So let me ask for the dakshin of your right thumb." That's what the painting is depicting. So immediately, no hesitation, he pulled out a knife and cut off his right thumb. "Thank you very much," and he walked away. So in telling of this narration, one of the misunderstandings, this is Bhaktisiddhanta explaining this pastime, one of the misunderstandings that just see how surrendered Ekalavya was, that when he cut off his thumb, it meant he couldn't use his archery anymore, because you need your thumb for the archery, but he couldn't use the archery anymore. So just see how surrendered he was. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, that's not the lesson. The lesson is, he wanted to learn from the guru, even though the guru had not accepted him as a disciple, because he was a deviant. He was a dishonest man. And so he refused to accept him as a disciple, because there were other persons that Dronacharya accepted that weren't Kshatriyas. But he didn't accept this fellow because he was a dishonest man. You don't give something valuable to a dishonest man because he can misuse it. So he didn't accept him as a student. And Drona was so intelligent that he understood how to deal with this fellow. He asked for his thumb, so he couldn't use his archery skill anymore. That's Bhaktisiddhanta's explanation. And now this is the opening slide again. We're done. True humility precedes true bhakti, because through true bhakti, one, at the topmost position, one can know Krishna, one can receive Krishna in one's life. And that connection with Krishna becomes unshakable through true bhakti, when there's true humility. And any trying circumstance isn't going to dissuade one from the path of bhakti, because there always is, in this material world, there's always some tribulation. Bhaktisiddhanta has a nice phrase. It's in Sri Brahma Samhita. He calls it trial by fire. There are impurities in each of us, and one of the purposes of the tribulation is like a fire, and it's very painful. But the painfulness is okay because it's purification of some impurity. Trial by fire. Or fire of ordeal, that's his phrase. Fire of ordeal. That's it. Fire of ordeal. So we're put through different difficulties sometimes. From time to time, it increases. And everyone experiences this, there's no exception, because there's impurity. And especially those impurities that we're holding on to tightly, that's one of the ways that Krishna has, it's not the only way, but fire of ordeal. And we go through the ordeal and it's ouch. I don't want the ordeal. But you may have to go through some ordeal in order to let go of an attachment to something that's temporary. Just a little sharing, and then I'm going to end. A few days back, I received a letter from a devotee in India who has been without a job for quite a while. He's been trying to, the situation. He lost his job for this reason, that reason. And then he's without a job and without a job and without a job. And he wants to get a job. It's not happening. And it seems like it's lining up a little bit, some interviews and so forth, and then it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So it's an ordeal for him. So why? Or what's the lesson? Not like Krishna's cruel, Krishna isn't giving him a job. Not Krishna's position to give people jobs. But why is it some people have and some people don't have? Take anything. That's one example. But his realization was, this ordeal is meant to help me become more genuine in my effort of taking genuine shelter in Krishna, genuine bhakti, rather than just the behaviors, offering my food and chanting my japa and observing Ekadasi and doing the do's and avoiding the don'ts, and I'm a good boy. And there's something more than being a good boy. There's the vidhis of bhakti. And Krishna wants, he's understanding, maybe it is, that Krishna wants me to go more deeply in the purpose behind these activities of bhakti. So he's giving me an opportunity to do that by this fire of ordeal. We'll all get our chance to undergo some ordeal, or 2 or 3 or 10. In different degrees, at different stages. And some people, it's like one thing after the next thing after the next thing. And sometimes it's more intermittent, and the flow is different for different people. But guaranteed, because the discomfort is the nature of the place. It's the place. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Dukkha means distress. And it's temporary. The stress is temporary. The place is temporary. The happiness is temporary. Everything's temporary. It's a place of temporariness and a place of distress. It's not a nice place to be. And therefore, some people say, let me out of here. I want liberation. I want moksha. And the devotees not saying that. Mama jamani jamani shri bhavatad bhaktira haitiki twai. Please engage me in devotional service eternally. Or the same that Raghunatha Das Goswami is offering. Let me get the dust of Rupa Goswami's lotus feet birth after birth. Or let me engage in the loving service of Radha and Krishna in the eternal land of Braja. Whether there's birth, or in other words, a place of consciousness, it's not a place of, let me out of here, the place is crazy. or it's too much trouble, or I don't want the bad, I want only the good, or something like that. Moving from a material conception to a spiritual conception requires humility, and humility then it brings back to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings. Dainya ushers in surrender, or conversely, if one isn't humble, who's going to surrender? Surrender doesn't sound pleasant. Like holding a white flag and the opposition party defeated you and you're coming out of surrender. Not like that. It's a positive gesture, the spiritual conception of into the loving arms of Krishna and his loving devotees. And the true and pure devotees have that aptitude. Pure devotees have that aptitude. And their life is simply extending what they have to others, the gift of Krishna's shelter. And they're just dedicated to that. They continue taking shelter, and they continue dedicating themselves to make the same opportunity available to others. People can say no, yes, or maybe. That's okay. Extend the opportunity to others, regardless, whatever the outcome. Not results-oriented, just compassion-oriented. And when the compassion is the driving force, it's powerful. Purity is the force. That's our life is to move in that direction, and that's what Raghunatha Das Goswami was teaching us yesterday evening. And the next couple of evenings, we're going to be dwelling on the same topic. So let's see if there's some discussion. If you have something you'd like to add, just raise your hand and the microphone will come over to you.
Hi, Maharaj.
Hi, Vo.
You were showing the pictures of the ladies in Vrindavan, and you were saying that they weren't living in riches or anything. They were living a really simple life.
Yes.
And every single thing that they did was kind of little service to Krishna.
Yeah.
So my question is, even if you were living a super luxurious, rich lifestyle,
Yes.
would you still be able to get to that level? Or
Yes.
do you have to give up everything?
No. The answer to the first question is yes. The second question is no. Here's an example. Here's multiple examples. But on Sunday at the temple, the Sunday feast program, I'm going to speak about Maharaj Ambarish. He had wealth. He was a king. And other kings. Yudhishthira. It is said in the Bhagavatam about Yudhishthira that he had wealth that equaled and surpassed the wealth of heaven. And he didn't chuck it. He engaged it in Krishna's service. Or here's another example. It's a really fine example. One of Lord Chaitanya's associates was named Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Vidya, not knowledge. Nidhi means ocean. He was an ocean of knowledge. That was his name, or his nickname, or Pundarik was his name, and Vidyanidhi. And he wanted to conceal his elevated position, and so he adopted a lifestyle that was just the opposite of what was inside. You know the story. You don't know the story? He was a grihasta, and he lived a life of not just luxury, but extravagance. Fancy clothes, perfumes, jewelry, hookah pipes, big furniture, and la 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 la. And he just like, leave me alone. Because I'm not an advanced person, so you don't need to pay attention to me. Thank you. That was his lifestyle. That was his preference. So there was a devotee that came from the same geographic area that he came from. Now, this particular devotee at this time was living in Navadvip, but previously his village from which he came was another place, and there was one of Lord Chaitanya's associates, whose name was Mukunda, came from the same place. So he knew who he really was, and he knew that this was just cosmetic, this hiding his spiritual opulence. And he, Mukunda, had a friend, and he had many friends, but one of his many friends was Gadadhar Pandit, same of the Panchatattva. So Gadadhar from childhood was renounced by his nature. He didn't like, and he just stayed away from any persons and things that were just, extravagantly. So Mukunda knew that. So he told, I want you to meet this really nice Vaishnava. He's very elevated. And he knew how how Gadadhar was going to respond. He, went in to see him, and there he was, leaning back on a couch and, posh, extravagant situation. And he looked at Gadadhar, and Gadadhar was making a face like, let me out of here. Why'd you bring me here? This is yuck. So what he did, Mukunda was known to be a good singer. So he sang some verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, not just recited them, but sang them. And as he sang them, Pundrik Vidyadhita lost it. He fell out of his couch. He fell on the ground, started rolling around in a state of mad ecstasy, just hearing verses from the Bhagavatam. He was that kind of elevated personality. And so Gadadhar understood, wow, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Thank you.
So there's many other such examples. Prahlad. Everybody knows Prahlad. So he was detached. And at the end, that whole end of that discussion, please, you want to give me some benediction? Please don't tempt me like this. Please don't tempt me like this. My father had all this opulence, and in a flash, it was all taken from him. Please don't tempt me like this. Please don't ask me to take something from you. Because between you and me, there's only one thing. You're the master, I'm the servant. That's it. There's nothing else. And he made this nice soliloquy, and then Lord Nrsingadev said, yeah, but I want someone to become the ruler of the Asuras. And you're the eldest, you're the son of Hiranyakashipu. So you take over Hiranyakashipu's kingdom, his riches, the whole shebang. But don't worry, you won't become enamored. So he became married, he became a king, he had all that stuff. But he was not attracted to it. Instead, Lord Nrsingadev said, you'll become freed from the contamination of this opulence by always engaged in chanting and singing my glories. And that's what he did. And he was protected. So back to your question, you don't have to throw everything away. Some persons are inclined. Some persons are not inclined. But those that are not inclined, the grihasta, or those persons that have wealth, they know how to use it in Krishna's service. They're not attached to it or what goes along with it, the comfortable lifestyle. They're not attached to it. Prabhupada set that example himself. He received so much. There's details of how he kept his money. But, the large part was his guru dakshin. He kept in a place when there was a need, he gave it all away to build a temple or to install a deity or something. his lifestyle was very simple. Although he had wealth, wasn't his. It was Krishna's, and using it in Krishna's service. So it depends upon a person and their situation of life. But have or not have, it's fine. It's how it's utilized, or to whom does it belong.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thinking about humility, Maharaj, I was thinking that for humility to become our second nature or just becoming our nature, is it? I mean, I'm circling back to my yesterday's and morning's question also. That I mean, to some level of understanding, we can exercise humility as long as our intelligence is guiding us in the right direction. But ultimately, it depends on Guru and Krishna's mercy that it becomes your second nature. That's what I'm thinking, Maharaj.
Well, you're saying the same thing you said this morning through the back door instead of the front door. But you're saying the same thing now that you said this morning. No, it was last night. Last night. You said last night. So these Goswamis or these elevated personalities, they were like that from the get-go. And then some of the rest of us are not like that from the get-go. So you're saying it differently. It's dependent upon the mercy of Krishna. Now, is there anything that I'm supposed to do on my side, or is it just dependent upon the mercy of Krishna? It falls from the sky and I become humble.
I mean, intelligence is guiding us, like in morning we discussed. Intelligence is guiding me. So that is keeping me aware of. But that's an exercise that I'm doing. It's a exercise of my intelligence.
Well, Tesham Satata Yuktanam, you know the verse? Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Bodhiyogam Tam. So Krishna gives the intelligence, which is his mercy, and then one can proceed. Dadami Bodhiyogam Tam Yenamam Upayantite, so they can come to me. That intelligence is necessary. And to whom does Krishna give that intelligence? It's not falling from the sky. They're persons that endeavor, tesham satata yuktanam. So we're engaged. We're all doing something. Dadami with love and devotion. Bhajatam priti. Bhaj is the root word for bhakti. Bhaj is the dhatu for bhakti. Bhajatam priti purvakam. So that's a conception or in some preliminary sadhana kind of intelligence. But the sadhana kind of intelligence, we may not be thinking, I want to be with Krishna. We may be thinking, I want relief from distress, or I want betterment of my economic situation, and so I'll be charitable because I'll know by being charitable I'll get this life and the future life's better economic situation. There's a what's in it for me calculation. So there's intelligence beyond that, but the intelligence initially is accepting a principle that's Vedic from Narayana. This is how we should live our life, and we need that, and it's given to those who are willing to accept it, especially when there are literatures provided by our acharyas abundantly. We're canvassing left, right, and sideways for people to take copies of these transcendental literatures and read them and join reading groups and, hear and understand and apply and so forth.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I had just two more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Maharaj, Namaha slide, May I please request you to open that slide, because there was one line that I wanted a little more understanding on that.
Okay, what's your question?
Sorry, Maharaj, I couldn't write that line. Yeah. Yeah, so nothing is left to be accomplished by the ability of the Lord. Can you kindly please elaborate on this?
Nothing is left to be accomplished by the ability of the Lord. So, it's Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. So, what does that mean? Same, the Lord gives Buddhi, how to achieve Him, Yenamam Upayanti Te, how you can come to Him, and that's sufficient. There's nothing more to be accomplished. Just say worldly or even otherworldly. The place of accepting, me accepting the shelter of the personality of Godhead. There may be other things. Let's say, you have a family. So there's other things you do. There's other things that you do. But to be accomplished by the Lord, it's just one thing. And if there's one thing, everything else follows this one thing, including the intelligence how to X, Y, Z. It's similar to 1866 Bhagavad Gita. Mam ekam sharanam, and nothing more to be accomplished. And the other things, there are other teachings within the Vedic texts that teach how to this and how to that and how the other thing. Supposing you don't know this, that, and the other thing, all you know is this one thing. That's sufficient. Now, if you know other things, then you can apply those other things in that same mood. But without that same mood, it's a distraction from the purpose of those things. That's the meaning.
Ability of the Lord.
How do you accomplish things? How do you walk across the floor?
Everything. Lord's mercy.
Some ability. If the ability is taken away, you can't walk across the floor, etc.
Last question, Maharaj. You mentioned towards the end, Maharaj, that moving from material to spiritual conception requires humility. I just wanted to hear a little more on this.
Well, that's the topic. That's the topic. Supposing one has material conception, and with that material conception, because it's my conception, I think it's the right conception, it's mine. I become invested in my conception. And because of that pridefulness or false ego-ness or the invested in my conception, I can't hear anything else. I can hear things that resonate with it or, augment it. But another conception altogether? This frame of reference, the third time, read this book because she, Vishaka, very intelligent, well trained in intellectualism and, atheistic intellectualism. And science is the answer. And, and she goes through it in she's transitioning from the material to the spiritual conception. Slowly, with resistance. And, some resentment that, with this and that and the other thing. And expresses it very openly. She's very articulate. She's very gifted writer. But, the transition between material and spiritual. in details. And then the unfolding of the foundation of a spiritual conception is, she just goes pages and pages and pages. Like, here comes the sun. And darkness is dispelled. So that material conception is dispelled by the spiritual conception.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're done. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And thank you all for coming.